3 actors, 1 role, and an argument that's been going on in comment sections for about a decade now. Maguire or Garfield or Holland. Most people argue this based on which one they grew up with. I want to try something different. I want to actually look at the numbers. Box office, return on budget, Rotten Tomatoes, and Metacritic across all 9 films, even how close each actor actually was to Peter Parker's age. None of this proves anyone's favorite is wrong, but it does make a pretty specific case, and I think it's stronger than people realize.
And there's so much to be excited about. The movie feels fresh and new and unique, and it's the first time that I've been allowed into the writer's room. So I really feel like there's a fingerprint of myself on the movie, and I'm really honored to be throwing it out there, and I think people are gonna love it.
Welcome back to Screen Therapy. Today's a bit different. We're comparing 3 actors using the stuff that actually gets measured in this industry: money, critical reception, casting, and consistency. I'm not trying to tell you Holland is objectively the better actor, because that's genuinely subjective. What I want to show you is that if you line up the data, his run holds up in a way the other 2 don't.
Hey, come on, I'm joking. Here's $5. What's up, Murph?
Here's where we're going. 4 parts: 1, box office and return on budget; 2, how critics actually scored these movies; 3, the age gap between each actor and the character they were playing; 4, and this is the one I think matters most, consistency across the whole run. Let's start with the money, since that's usually the first thing people bring up.
For that, I give you 100, and you're lucky to get that.
I need that money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Combined, the 9 live-action Spider-Man films have made about $7.94 billion worldwide. Holland's 4 films account for roughly $3.94 billion of that, just under half the franchise total, from less than half the movies. No Way Home, on its own, is the 7th highest-grossing film ever made. That's an all-time record, sitting above most Marvel movies. But raw box office isn't really a fair comparison across eras, and I want to be upfront about that. Ticket prices are different now than they were in 2002. The MCU machine is bigger than anything Sony had when Maguire was doing this. Holland's films had a built-in crossover audience from a decade of Avengers movies before he even showed up as a solo lead. None of that is Holland's doing. It's the environment his films existed in. So the more honest number, I think, is return on budget. How much a film made relative to what it actually cost to produce. That strips out some of the inflation and franchise size differences. Holland's trilogy returned about 7.36 times its budget. Maguire's trilogy returned about 4.15 times. Garfield's 2 films returned about 3.41 times. That's a real gap. Even accounting for the fact that Holland had Marvel's marketing machine behind him, a 7.36x return isn't something that just happens because a studio spent a lot on ads. Audiences still had to actually show up multiple times across multiple films without the box office cratering the way it did for Garfield's 2nd movie. Now, box office and ROI are business metrics. They tell you how the audience responded with their wallets, not whether the movies were actually good. A film can make $1 billion and still not be very well made. So let's look at what critics thought.
I think what Peter Parker is going through post Spider-Man No Way Home is really profound and unique to the superhero genre. I think that we have villains that are really new and fresh and interesting, and the action is...
Here are the Rotten Tomatoes scores for every film. Spider-Man at 90%, Spider-Man 2 at 93%, Spider-Man 3 at 62%, The Amazing Spider-Man at 72%, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at 52%, Homecoming at 92%, Far From Home at 91%, No Way Home at 93%, and Brand New Day at 90%. Every single one of Holland's films is above 90. That's 4 for 4. Neither of the other 2 actors managed that. Maguire dropped to 62 by his 3rd movie, a pretty steep fall from a 93. Garfield's 2nd film is actually the lowest scored live-action Spider-Man movie on record at 52%, which is closer to a coin flip than a recommendation. Metacritic tells basically the same story, and it's usually considered the stricter of the 2 aggregators, since it uses a weighted scoring system rather than a simple percentage of positive reviews. Homecoming scored 73, Far From Home 69, No Way Home 71, and Brand New Day 71. Nothing spikes, nothing collapses. It just stays in a fairly tight band across 4 films and 5 years. Now, to be fair, and I think this is important, Spider-Man 2 at 93% is arguably still the best reviewed individual Spider-Man film of any era, and a lot of people, critics included, would put it above anything Holland's done. That's a completely reasonable position, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you No Way Home is a better film than Spider-Man 2, because I don't think that argument is as strong. What's different is what happens after the high point. Raimi followed his best film with his worst one just 3 years later. Garfield's team followed a decent but unspectacular first film with something that actively killed the franchise. Holland's hasn't had a genuine low point yet, at least not according to the people who write these reviews for a living.
And then if you watch Iron Man 2, he wore like American football pads that were red and gold. I'm on my 5th movie, and I just got a zipper. So it's been a steady...
Peter Parker, in the comics and in most of these movies, is somewhere between 15 and 17, a high schooler. That's kind of the whole point of the character. He's supposed to be a kid figuring out an impossible responsibility, not an adult who happens to look young. Tobey Maguire was 26 when the first Spider-Man came out, playing a 17-year-old. Andrew Garfield was 27 during filming of The Amazing Spider-Man, and close to 29 by the time it actually released in theaters. Tom Holland was around 19 when he first showed up as Peter in Civil War. Some reporting puts him as young as 18 during actual filming, which makes him the only one of the 3 who was anywhere close to the character's stated age. That's roughly a decade of gap for the other 2 actors, give or take, and I think it genuinely shows up on screen. At least to my eye, Maguire's Peter reads as older and more contemplative, less like a kid figuring things out in real time, more like someone in his mid-20s who's already arrived at a certain amount of self-awareness. He's got this melancholic, almost philosophical quality that works really well for the character Raimi was building, but it doesn't read as 16. Garfield's Peter is confident and kinda cool in a way that's hard to fully buy as an awkward outcast at his high school, no matter how good the skateboard through the hallway scene is. He's charming in a way that reads more college-aged than freshman year of high school. Joe and Anthony Russo, who directed Civil War, have talked publicly about wanting an actor who could believably still be in school. That was reportedly a deliberate part of the casting decision, not something that just happened to work out. I want to be clear that you can still prefer Maguire's or Garfield's performance. That's genuinely a taste thing, and there's an argument that an older actor brings more control and precision to certain scenes than a teenager can. But the age gap itself is a factual difference, not an opinion, and I think it's a real part of why Holland's version feels more like an actual teenager on screen instead of an adult performing teenageness.
Mind-blowing. I can't quite believe that today is finally here, so I just can't wait to get to work. It's such a perfect full circle story. I'm just honored to be a part of it.
This is the part of the argument I think actually matters most, more than the box office numbers, more than the age thing. Maguire's era has a genuinely great film in Spider-Man 2. Again, probably still the best single Spider-Man movie by critical consensus. But it also has Spider-Man 3, which tanked to 62% and basically ended that trilogy on a sour note, with a fan base that still argues about what went wrong almost 20 years later. Garfield's era never even got a 3rd film. The second one, the one that was supposed to set up an entire expanded Sinister Six universe with spin-offs and everything, is the lowest rated Spider-Man movie there is. That's a big part of why the reboot got canceled, and the rights ended up going back toward what became the MCU deal. Holland's era is 4 films deep at this point, spanning close to a decade, and nothing has dropped below 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Spider-Man 2 might still be the strongest thing any of these 3 actors has been part of. But if you're judging an entire run, Holland's era hasn't had a bad entry yet, and neither of the other 2 eras can say that.
I thought that you could sense that with your Peter tingle.
Please do not start calling it my Peter tingle.
So what's up? You can dodge bullets but not bananas?
I also don't think it's fair to just present this as a clean win for Holland without pointing out where the case is weaker. For one, Holland's had more films to work with than Garfield, and a much bigger studio machine behind him than either of the other 2. And it's easier to stay consistent when Marvel is controlling quality across the whole slate compared to Sony, working somewhat more independently. For another, critical scores and box office don't capture things like cultural impact or how much a specific performance meant to people at a specific time. Maguire's Spider-Man came out in 2002 and reshaped what a superhero movie could even be commercially. That's a kind of significance a spreadsheet doesn't really account for. So this isn't a case that Holland is the best in some absolute, unquestionable sense. It's a case that, on the specific measures we can actually compare across all 3 eras, his run comes out ahead.
I mean, you can't really. I mean, I remember seeing Avengers 1 with one of my best friends, Tom Hutton, in the cinema as a kid, so excited, and now I'm in it. You know, I'm walking around with Iron Man and Captain America, and I can now kind of call them peers and stuff, so it's still pretty surreal.
If you want more of these, where we take an argument people have in the comments and actually look at what backs it up, subscribe and tell me which number in this video surprised you the most, or which part of the argument you'd push back on. I'd actually like to see the disagreement in the comments.